Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Digital Strategy 2026 series. I'm Daniel Bianchini, and I'm joined today by Matthew Taylor and Shane O'Hare, part of the team here at Common Ground, to explore what we see as one of the most urgent and misunderstanding shifts in digital marketing right now, GEO. Generative Engine Optimization, or GEO, is already reshaping how brands are discovered online. The AI-driven search shift is just coming into 2026. It's happening right now. We're seeing a real impact across 2025, from sudden traffic drops due to AI reviews to changing click behavior across buyer journeys. And as we head into 2026, these changes will only accelerate. So what is GEO? Put simply, it's about optimizing your brand's content and authority for visibility within AI-generated responses. Not just climbing the traditional top 10 in Google, it's the next evolution of search. And unlike traditional SEO, GEO focuses on being surfaced in tools like AI, ChatGPT, and Perplexity, which content is not ranked, it is cited. Today, we're going to unpack why GEO matters for both your 2025 performance and planning. We explore how it differs from SEO, what optimization looks like, and where we're seeing brands gain or lose visibility in generative environments. To get started, let's take a step back. I'm going to come to you first, Shane. Why is GEO becoming so important as we move through 2025 and into 2026? And what's driving this shift? What do brands need to understand, and how discovery is changing? It's a broad question, but it's a good one to get started.
Yeah, it's definitely a good place to start. I think ultimately why it's becoming more important and why it's becoming more important is ultimately because more people are using it. And the reason why more people are using it, certainly in the discovery phase, is because in many cases it offers a more useful experience compared to something like Google. So I think most people, if not everyone watching this, will have used ChatGPT or similar tools. And if you're looking for information, it's much more valuable to be able to ask that question and get the instant answer compared with kind of jumping through different websites and trying to sort of find what you're looking for. But it's also really, really useful to be able to have that back and forth, because most people asking a question will have follow-up questions, and the whole experience is just much, much more useful, certainly in that discovery phase. It's not going to be the case for every industry or every brand. If you work in the legal sector, for example, there might be a kind of trust question around using something like ChatGPT versus something like Google, which is much more established. So it's not the same case for everyone. But ultimately, I think it's a much more useful way of finding information as you're kind of early on in that sort of buying journey, compared with the kind of traditional way of using Google search. I think a lot of people will still continue to use Google, which we can obviously see them doing. It's not that they're just kind of taking all that traffic by any means, but I think we will start to see the kind of pace in terms of usership rapidly increase into 2026, as we've seen this year as well.
And sort of like, before I come over across to you, Matt, do you think this has anything related to do to sort of age as well, and sort of demographics around that? Like for myself, I use it quite frequently, but I know that my wife doesn't. I know that my parents don't even know what it is, but then the younger generation where I've been out and about, they are using it all the time. So, I mean, is that going to have an impact on sort of like how quickly it's adopted and how that would move forward?
It's a really important point, and I agree. There's definitely a kind of demographic element to it. I don't have the data to hand, but I would agree that the older generation are a little bit more behind. The younger generation are definitely using it as their kind of go-to. My son, he uses Google's AI mode as the kind of default rather than Google now. And there'll obviously be kind of early adopters, people who work in technology and everything else as well. So it is a key thing to consider. But generally speaking, I do think most people are using it more and more as time goes on, and that's just going to continue to kind of go through the roof into next year.
And moving to yourself, Matt, like, why do you think that GEO will become so important through 2026? Obviously, Shane's outlined a number of different areas here, and we just talked about the usership in terms of demographic. I mean, what else could there be to make sure it's important?
I mean, realistically, it's the fact that it goes beyond just search for a lot of people. So a lot of people are integrating it more into their kind of day-to-day jobs, essentially. So obviously, you've got everybody from kind of, again, going back to demographics, you've got everybody from kind of kids who can use it for school, you've got students at university, but equally, you've got people within kind of every industry are able to make use of it within their day-to-day role. So it's not just essentially it's not just a replacement for Google, which I think is the thing that has been the most seismic shift, and probably the reason why it will in the end kind of take market share from Google in ways that kind of Bing hasn't been able to do, and that kind of thing. Because realistically, even AI mode within Google, you probably don't even use that in the same way that you do like a ChatGPT, for example. So yes, you would use it for kind of search stuff, but you're not using it for kind of create me this image or write me this content or doing those sorts of things, which has added usage basically. So as people adopt it for those things, it will then become part of their default workflow rather than kind of just I need to use Google or this. It's like I'm already using this, so I'll kind of search within it as well. So it's probably the biggest. I would probably even put it as a bigger switch than when kind of Google took over from Yahoo. From a search behavior point of view, it is literally an equally, if not bigger, change in the way people search stuff, and kind of from even a language point of view, the sorts of queries that people are putting in, it's very different. It's very different. Although, like obviously, Google for ages has been saying kind of people are using longer queries to get results. This is just kind of turbocharging that basically.
Mm-hmm. And I guess it allows them to just generally have a conversation rather than to put in those very high 1 word, 2 word sort of intents. It's very long tail, specific prompts rather than queries.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, if you were to like complete whiteboard, you've never heard of a search engine before, how would you design it? That ability to have a kind of conversational text and kind of get the answer right there in a kind of in a form that you trust is probably where you go to it. You wouldn't necessarily design Google or kind of similar stuff. You would probably go something more akin to ChatGPT or AI mode within Google anyway. It's just from where we started the technology. It's a bit like petrol and electric cars. If you designed a car purely on the benefits, you would probably say you would default go to electric. It's easier to maintain. There's a whole load of benefits to it. You wouldn't then go from that to petrol cars. You probably wouldn't go in the opposite way. You wouldn't replace Google if you already had ChatGPT or similar LLM really.
Mm-hmm. And I guess like as we move forward, and you sort of touched upon it there, like Google is the one that's probably being hit the most in this case because of the way that users are interacting with LLMs and different platforms rather than going through the search engine, and also with obviously the introduction of AI overviews and their own AI mode. That's all having a knock-on effect on brands from a organic traffic perspective, and there's this obviously this discussion in the industry around what is the difference between SEO and GEO, and there's lots of things around there. So I wanted to pick up on that conversation really and talk to you about, like, Shane, what do you think is the main differences? Are there any differences? I mean, yeah, great to get some information around that.
Yeah. I mean, they are fundamentally two different channels, SEO and GEO, and I think they should be treated separately. SEO is obviously kind of keyword focused, content focused, technical focused, and it's about appearing in the search engines. GEO is about kind of building a brand and an authority that you want, or you want to train AI assistants to cite and reference essentially. So even though there's a lot of overlap, and there is a lot of overlap, I do think they need to be treated separately. In terms of your point, Dan, in terms of GEO kind of eating into SEO traffic and other channels, I agree. I think certainly from a clicks perspective, that is happening, but I think it's a mistake to think that that's lost. The discovery phase is still happening. It's just, for many people, it's just happening somewhere else. And if your brand is in that other location, i.e. ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc., then you're still going to get that brand awareness. People are still going to perhaps come through to your website, depending on the query and whether there is a link. But ultimately, that discovery phase is still happening. So just because you've lost that traffic doesn't mean you've lost that kind of brand awareness. I think that's a really important point for people to keep front of mind.
I think, yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, one I'd like to come back to in a moment, just to like, essentially you're saying that things are happening on third-party sites. Google, for example, has always wanted people just to do things on their own site. They don't really want to send traffic to anyone else's site. So and ChatGPT and stuff is doing a similar thing. So let's park that for a second and we'll just come back to it. I think for Matt, coming to you in terms of, there's always been this search engine rankings and obviously the traffic from there. And now we're talking about GEO and it's just like visibility and brand awareness and stuff. I can see where people are being confused of what the difference is. And also Shane indicated that there is quite a bit of overlap. So it may also provide some confusion from users that, well, it's just SEO or it's just GEO. It's like, yeah, can you understand what people are saying?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I always consider it, obviously SEO is associated with Google because of their market share, essentially, but it's search engine optimization. And in my opinion, there's kind of, the LLMs are still a search engine in the same way that YouTube is a search engine, fundamentally. So I think it falls within that realm. Obviously, it's the specialism within there, and what you're doing, there is, Shane's right, there's overlap, but there's also very specific things that you need to do for GEO specifically, which you probably wouldn't do for SEO necessarily. And I'm sure we'll come on to those later, but it is kind of, to pick up on a point, essentially the user journey hasn't changed in so far as the steps are all still there. The behavioral change is where people are executing those particular steps. And realistically, it's whether you want to consider the important thing is traffic or the important thing is being in the discussion effectively. So if all you care about is the volume of traffic to your website, then that's kind of a more of an SEO thing, and you're going to find that that's incredibly difficult to maintain. Realistically, if you want to get your information and kind of your opinion and your views and your products or services in front of somebody, you still need to do what you would do in any kind of marketing approach, which is still appear in the stages within the funnel that you want to appear in. So LLMs tend to be a bit more towards the top of the funnel because people still need to come to a website to buy stuff or to get a service or that kind of thing. So that you just need to accept that that's where your audience is for that particular part, in the same way that your audience might be on email at a different stage or on social or that kind of thing. So it's definitely going to take more traffic than social media has from a marketing point of view. And it's probably not going to generate the traffic to your website that those additional channels. So usually when you add a channel, you get more traffic. Whereas this, you're adding a channel, you're getting less from Google, but you're not going to lose 100 from Google and suddenly gain 100 from ChatGPT. You might lose 100 sessions from Google and gain 5 from ChatGPT because people are experiencing things differently.
So that sort of goes back to the point where Shane was saying the discovery is still happening, but it's just happening somewhere else, and you're not necessarily seeing that traffic switch dynamic, like one for one.
Yeah, exactly. And fundamentally, what you're doing is obviously search engines is keyword driven, whereas LLMs or GEO is more kind of entity driven and entity building and that kind of thing. So it's similar in so far as those two things aren't completely unrelated, but it is a kind of a different approach from one to the other, and people just need to get confident and comfortable with, because previously obviously you could look at a keyword and go, that's the search volume, here's why I rank, kind of thing. It's not the same within kind of GEO. Essentially you have to look at maybe share of voice or that kind of thing, which is it's going to be a learning curve for people, and trying to get that in that messaging when you've almost been drilling kind of the C-suite level around kind of visibility, traffic, that sort of thing. You now need to, you almost about facing on that and going, traffic isn't as important as it once was. Actually, what's important is kind of share of voice and being in the right places at the right time.
Anything to add there, Shane, before
No, I think that summarizes it quite well, to be honest.
And I guess like from a a viewer's point of view in terms of they're working for their B2B brands and they're thinking they're getting some sort of push down from the C-suite and go, oh, why are you doing SEO? Why are you not doing GEO and things like that? How should they be sort of talking about this in terms of like a combined effort? Is it two singles? Is it one over the other? I mean, how would you see that that should be really pushed forward and discussed?
I mean, fundamentally, obviously, it's the thing that we should have probably started with is GEO is still very new, and exactly what goes into it isn't like SEO has been around for donkey's years, so kind of there's a lot more understanding of what is good SEO effectively, but realistically, what is good SEO is also good for GEO. So if you look at the technical aspects of SEO, for example, you're looking at how well is Google able to navigate your site, understand your information, and understand your authority within a particular topic area. Obviously, that's partially technical, that's partially kind of content areas. But similarly for the LLMs, it's kind of can the LLMs discover your content? Do they understand your authority in a particular area? Do they understand your content? Are you providing them content in the way that they want to present it to people? Because I think one of the big shifts is if you look at how a ChatGPT, for example, responds to a question is very different to what you get from Google, but also what you would normally write. I guess it's not a ChatGPT is not giving you a blog post back. It's giving you a summary. It's giving you bullet points. It's giving you kind of here's the information that you need. It's all nicely wrapped up in a very agreeable kind of tone of voice. But that's the kind of, you need to be able to feed the models in a way that they will be able to create that from your content in. So there's kind of differences, but a lot of good SEO is good GEO. And similarly, it's kind of, there's bits that probably went out of fashion to a certain extent within SEO, or kind of Google implied that they were devalued. So things like FAQ schema, for example, or schemas in general. It's gone from probably a nice to have, or if it's easy to do, because it can often be an expensive endeavor to add it to a website retroactively. That's now stuff that you do really need for the LLMs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think like you sort of touched on, like just saying going out of old fashioned. LLMs are they are immature at the moment. It's an immature sector. And a lot of the things that we used to do for SEO a long time ago are possibly now still coming back into fashion now, and we have to dust off those old playbooks. I mean, Shane, are you seeing much of that at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think it's hard to say at this stage how long that sort of stuff will last. You'd imagine, the people at ChatGPT and Perplexity will be aware of people gaming the system and try to sort of improve the algorithms to kind of weed that out. But certainly, yeah, we're seeing. So one example is listicles. They're quite a good way of, if there is a listicle on your website and third-party websites which feature your brand, you're more likely to be included in LLMs for comparison terms, so best X company or best X solution. So you're right, it's a very kind of legacy SEO tactic. People are using it at the moment, but my honest opinion is it's not going to last too long, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I think there's like realistically, people need to understand authority. I think people are defaulting to what's the trick basically that I can do to get the LLM to feature me in X, Y, or Z. As you suggested, Shane, there's kind of, the thing is, if what that generates is poor and that starts to impact how people use it, obviously it is an AI and it's just being trained on stuff. So presumably they would tweak the training in order to go, actually, just because this person happens to appear in 1,000 articles on who's the best SEO or whatever, it like that is realistically not a good kind of data point for it to be using and surfacing. So it's slightly different to the way that Google do it. And like, obviously, if they're not sending somebody to a site, they're not as concerned with site quality, probably to a certain extent, as Google are. But yeah, you're right, if there's an impact in how people use it, I think it will be addressed enough. But people do need to, rather than look for the easy tricks, in a similar way to SEO rather than trying to game the system and do whatever the latest trick is. It's always been the case is if you build a really strong brand, really good authority, and create good content, ultimately that wins from short term to long term. You're not having to suddenly pivot the next time an algorithm changes.
I'll be honest with you, Matt, I'm shocked that SEOs or marketers are trying to find a short-term gain to long term. So
Indeed, breaking news.
yeah, absolutely. But you're absolutely right. We need to be thinking long term here. I think the change in GEO and LLMs are going to happen and go forward a lot quicker than anything that's happened in the search engine sort of space. So as you indicated as well, Shane, like that period of being able to find those little loopholes, I think will be very short. So look long term rather than the short term thing. Okay, and I think another thing that I just want to really cover off really quickly, and I think there's lots of acronyms being used for the term GEO and all of that sort of stuff. There's loads flying around, and obviously we use GEO here at Common Ground. You've got AEO, you've got like AIO, you've got all of these different ones. Like, what should we be calling it? Like, obviously we call it GEO, but I mean, what is it? Why should we be calling that, and why it shouldn't be the others? Shane, can I come to you on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately a lot of them mean the same thing, which is confusing for the user. It's a bit slightly annoying for us as an agency, but I think the industry is largely settled on GEO, which I think makes slightly more sense than the others. It's a bit more of a mouthful, but GEO seems to be the standard so far, and I think it's stuck for at least sort of 6 months now. So I think that's probably the term to use. But ultimately, I think they all generally mean the same thing. It's optimizing your website and your brand to feature in AI assistants like ChatGPT.
Yeah,
it's also it's an interesting one because I personally tend to reference ChatGPT all the time, and I think that's again it's a reflection of their market share. I think they've got a similar market share in AI to what Google has in search, which is why they used Google's used interchangeably, and I think that's going to be the case with ChatGPT as well. Personally, I don't see Google's AI mode, even though they have huge volumes of traffic. I think they're going to play more of the Bing role within I think more minimal market share, just because it's a very specialized aspect of AI that they're offering, as opposed to obviously they could build lots of other things into it and can use it for lots of things, but I think already ChatGPT has got quite a dominant position.
I mean, personally, I think they're slightly different as well, where obviously ChatGPT, as you indicated, can integrate into lots of different things, whereas AI mode seems to be predominantly within the search to make searching on the web an easier experience or a different experience to what we do. So they're slightly different in that way from my point of view. But yeah, it's really I agree. This is the GEO, and that's what we stuck to, and that's the way that we're working. So I just wanted to clear that up for those watching. So we sort of talked about the difference between GEO and SEO, and obviously whether they should be combined or separate and stuff like that. So what should brands be focusing on as we move into 2026? And Matt, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I mean, the very obvious one is realistically making sure you have the building blocks for effective GEO in place. So looking at I'm still going to call it indexability, even though that's probably not the correct term, but can the LLMs find all of the information that you've got available? Are they able to kind of review it efficiently? Obviously, things like structuring content in the right way and providing kind of what they're looking for and kind of building your kind of entity relevance and all of that kind of stuff. I think some stuff that sits slightly away from that, so it's bits that people are really going to have to focus on this year, is things like conversion rate optimization, because you're definitely not going to be getting the same volume of traffic from certainly from Google, but also, as I've already said, you're not going to replace Google with Google traffic with traffic from an LLM. So you've got to be really focused on every time somebody comes to your website, you need to be making the most of that visit. So I think there's going to be a lot of people need to put a lot of work into their conversion rate optimization. And then the other thing really is authority building. So whether that's on your own site or kind of, again, what is old is new again, kind of digital PR, kind of that sort of approach, which again, to a certain extent, kind of went out of fashion to a certain extent, as that's going to become more important again, as kind of looking for those authority signals of being quoted regularly in other places. That's going to be important. So kind of anything that you can do to kind of become a data source, become a kind of have something that other people can't, whether that's some really good quotes from kind of knowledgeable people within your team, or whether that's kind of data or trends or those kinds of bits of information. So there's kind of definitely three things there. It's kind of the quality of the content, the technical aspects, and then the brand building and the kind of off-page authority. Oh, and fourth, CRO. So good luck with Shane for that. If you've got some additional ones.
You covered a lot there, Matt. Shane, have you got any other angles that you think that brands should be focusing as we move forward into 2026 around this?
Yeah, no, I agree with those points. I think they're the kind of principal priorities. I think for most brands, the kind of first thing to do is just get started, because I think this has been around for a good year or so now, in terms of almost mainstream adoption. And from what I can see, there's a lot of people kind of sitting on their hands, waiting to see where it goes, and they're really missing out on that early adopter advantage. Many of them are doing it because they don't know how. They might not have budget. They just kind of want to see where it goes. Just get started would be my advice. And then once you are started, obviously the areas that Matt covered off would be the priorities. I think the key one, and the one that differs probably more than most from SEO, is the kind of content distribution. So it's not, I think with GEO, it's not enough to just have the content on your site and talk about things that you want to talk about on your site. There's much more emphasis on other websites talking about it as well. To give one specific example, we know that ChatGPT at least references Reddit, I think, at around 50% of its of prompt responses, which is a huge number. So I think there's a correlation there between having your brand mentioned on sites like Reddit and other community sites, which we don't quite see on the SEO side of things. So there are some key differentiators there, and I think that's one of the big ones for GEO.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dan, carry on.
Yeah, carry on.
I was just going to say another kind of area that people have got to understand difference is the importance of kind of building topics as opposed to building standalone pieces of content as well. So kind of you can no longer just kind of have 15 different articles on 15 different topic areas on your site and hope that works. You really need to give that level of depth and understanding and kind of a really good pillar and cluster model, for example, over particular topic areas, because again, that's A, what your users are going to want, which is ultimately the most important thing, but B, it will help the LLMs kind of understand the topical authority that you have. So it's kind of having that additional content and context for them.
And I guess that becomes about building that authority with your brand, whether that's in B2B SaaS, whether that's cybersecurity, whatever it is, you want to be the authority within that area, and that content plays a part in it. Just creating it in the right way for both machines now and users, rather than in what we've always used to do is just make sure it's focus on users.
Mm-hmm.
And just like moving on from that, and I think just to pick up on what you were saying, Shane, about getting started right now and moving into that phrase, is like, what should brands start on right now? What is it that they can do to just get that move into? I mean, what's the easiest things to say? Right, we're going to do this, and if I do one thing, that's going to be it.
Mm-hmm. The approach that we recommend as an agency, the approach that I would recommend personally, is step one, just understanding how your audience is actually using tools like ChatGPT. And if budget's an issue, you can spend a lot of time and kind of do this manually by going in there and typing certain things and see where you show up. Or if you kind of want to take it seriously, you can actually have a kind of full comprehensive visibility audit focused around the kinds of things that people would search in AI assistants, which you would want to be present for. And it can look at things like sort of average position for certain prompts. It can look at things like the sentiment, so whether it's positive or negative. It can look at things like share of voice. So it's a really, really useful first step, I think, before you start moving on to the let's optimize for GEO. First of all, let's find out where you are. I think once you've got that initial data, the second step for me would be to do a bit of an assessment in terms of two key areas that actually move the dial for GEO. So how well is your website and content structured, both from a technical point of view, a kind of readability point of view from the AI's perspective, and then also a bit of an audit in terms of your sites and your brand's authority. So citations from third-party websites, links, industry awards, mentions from sort of community sites like Reddit. Get a good grasp in terms of how you're set up from those two areas, and then start to build out a strategy to plug the gaps, both where you are at the moment versus best practice, but more importantly, where you are at the moment versus the competitors who are winning in AI tools. I think that's fundamentally the way that I'd recommend approaching it.
There's a lot there to get started with, isn't there?
There is.
Reeling off a few. Matt, is there anything else there that you think we could add to that, or maybe a different point of view?
Yeah, I mean, just to throw in another kind of quick and easy one is go, if you've got GA4, which hopefully most people watching this would do, go in there and just see where people are landing onto the site from places like ChatGPT. You can see them. They usually come up as referrers. Sometimes they come up as something slightly different. So if you look at the source medium, you'll be able to find them in there. And just look at where people are landing onto the site, because that will give a really strong indication of what content is kind of being effective at the moment for you. So we've seen it for a lot of clients because we've done this. It's like ultimately you still have that behavioral similarities with the content that you have. So top of the funnel content still drives higher volume from a ChatGPT, for example. Your commercial pages tend to be a lot higher conversion rate than your top of the funnel pages, as you would expect. So it's really similar behavior. So you need to understand, are we still getting that top of the funnel content? Are we still getting the middle? Are we still getting the bottom? And in what volumes? So you can identify where you've got an issue, if you potentially do have an issue, and what's working and what's not. The other thing that I would also do is like a content audit of the site as well. So obviously, like a lot of the things that we need to do is make sure that the content is effective for the ICPs that we're trying to target, basically. So identify your target audiences and then start to assign actually what content have we got. So if we've got, I don't know, financial services, tech and HR, for example, have we got relevant content? Are the LLMs going to understand our authority in those particular areas? Or is 90% of our content about financial services? So they're never going to understand what we're saying about other things, basically, or never associate us with those other things. So kind of just adding in kind of, I guess, more manual stuff you can do is definitely look at your GA4 to see what's working, and then kind of mapping what is our audience, what are they, have we got content that even if it's not effective, at least we've got something, basically, and then you can kind of create the strategy from there. But it definitely needs to start with a strategy and kind of almost a benchmarking kind of thing. And as Shane said, there's manual things, there's automation, there's tools, there's all sorts of different things. And then it's just kind of it's getting started with stuff. So I personally, I'm an advocate for starting with the things that will have the broadest possible impact. So rather than starting with content creation, start with the technical aspects. So making sure that ChatGPT or something like Perplexity or Claude or whatever can access and understand your information in the most effective way. And that might be template level changes. So if you start with them, that might have a really broad impact, as opposed to kind of crafting a really great piece of content, which will have it's definitely something you need to do at some point, but it's probably not where you need to start.
So I think what the collective answers is we've given people a strategy for 2026 and all of the things that they could be doing and should be doing going forward. But as you said, there's plenty of things that you should be doing, but you just need to get started. And today's the best day to do that. I think just to touch upon one thing is measurement? You sort of talked about GA4 and things like that, and traditionally from an organic perspective, or though things are changing more recently, you look at your rankings, you look at your visibility, you look at your traffic, etc. How do we start to measure GEO and the success of that as we move into 26? And Shane, is coming to you. I mean, how do you see that happening?
Yeah, I think for right now and maybe into 2026 as well, it's not the main metric isn't going to be traffic or clicks. That's just not going to show you how well you're doing with GEO. I think there's definitely an argument to measure conversions, as Matt touched on, because people do come from AI tools once they're ready to make that decision. But in terms of the key metric, I think it needs to be visibility. Because that's what you're aiming for with these AI tools. You're aiming to be visible when people are going through this research phase, and you're not expecting a click, at least at that phase. And we know, or we can sort of really assume that that's what most use of these AI tools is about. It's the discovery phase. So the metric's got to be visibility. I think it needs to kind of sit outside of the kind of website analytics and just be a part of a kind of broader visibility strategy in a similar way that kind of brand building is and everything else. But yeah, ultimately, for me, it's visibility. You can look at the broad metrics, share of voice, sentiment, etc., and you can chunk that down into specific topics, whether they're kind of pillars and clusters that are important to the business, whether they're sort of top, middle, and funnel in terms of the buying journey, whether they're based on different ICPs, etc. But you can kind of get into the detail a bit with specific prompts and how you're positioned for them and how that's changing over time as well. So there's lots to do, but visibility is the main one.
Okay. And Matt, I mean, coming to you on this, do you think there's any other ways? Obviously, Shane's talked more on visibility, and I know you mentioned conversion earlier. Would you be looking at conversion and stuff?
I would definitely go with conversion on the basis that realistically, most people are going to need to get buy-in for budgetary reasons, essentially. So it's going to be an incredibly difficult conversation if you're just going to kind of a senior leadership team and saying, we're visible, we're there, but we haven't got there is no pound value or dollar value back from that particular thing. So I completely agree with Shane. Visibility is incredibly important within that, because that's the building block of everything. And certainly I wouldn't use the really traditional metrics from a website point of view. But I would, if you can attribute things early back into his revenue we've generated as a result of ChatGPT, even if it's just anecdotal. So I've spoken to a lot of clients and they're like, oh, I was speaking to someone the other day and they said they found us because we appeared in, they asked ChatGPT and I appeared in the list, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it definitely in the kind of the long term, it's to a certain extent, as well as training LLMs on kind of your business and stuff, you almost need to train your senior managers on actually these are the new metrics that we need to be discussing. And realistically, it's going to be more towards what are traditionally probably PR style metrics or kind of TV advertising or radio advertising metrics, where you're talking about reach and kind of how many people are like column inches and that kind of stuff that was kind of default in PR back in the day. You're probably going to then actually be looking at things like, as Shane said, sentiment, visibility, share of voice. There is average rankings. I'm not a huge fan of average rankings because there's like in Google, that makes a bit more sense because you know how many are on a page, kind of that sort of thing, but you don't necessarily kind of have that same visibility, especially when that's being tracked across multiple models. The other thing, obviously, is much as we're discussing kind of LLMs and things like ChatGPT, you do have Google's AI overviews. You've still got the kind of the pure play Google type stuff. So I know like Ahrefs, SEMrush, they're all building in these kind of visibility within AI overviews and stuff within their reporting. So again, that might be a good one to use early on as we are being effective or we're not being effective, whichever way you want to go, to try and get that buy-in and that kind of budgetary kind of approval effectively.
And you sort of said it's really early in the stage, so like some tools are still building these out. We don't have all
Yeah.
the information as well. I read somewhere more recently, so what about a webmaster tools or Google search, like a search console for LLMs or for ChatGPT to say, okay, your brand's appeared for X and Y visibility? It's quite difficult to see any of that. Or, I mean, do you think that might be coming in the future?
It'll be interesting because it's obviously Google have, because it's been beneficial to them. They have provided that level of insight and information and that kind of thing because it's the way that their business model works. They need kind of that constant flow of stuff, whether they're on a subscription basis and they're kind of getting that direct money from end users. The kind of a chat GPT is obviously subscription. Do they need to offer that level of insight, or like do they kind of almost look at Google and go, actually, they provided all of this information and all that happened was, depending on your opinion, obviously, as people drove down the quality of the search results because they could try and reverse engineer and game stuff as much as they could. So it depends how much they want to be kind to marketers and advertisers, because obviously a lot of the information Google provides is also as a result of them running ads on their platform, which currently the LLMs don't need to do.
Yeah. Okay. Shay, anything to add before I move on?
No, I don't think so. I think Matt summarised that quite well.
Okay, great. I'm conscious of time. I have two more questions I was hoping to run through with you guys. The first one is what are the biggest mistakes you think brands will make with GEO as we move into 2026? And I went to Shane first last time, so Matt, I'm going to come to you on that one.
Cool. I would go waiting too long to adopt it. I know Shane said it earlier, you've referenced it, Dan. Like the best time to have started optimizing for it was probably a year ago. The second best time is today. You just got to get on and do it. Fundamentally, there's been a lot of shifts with, or people have tried to say this is the next big thing. So voice search for ages was the next big thing. Every year it's going to be the next big thing. It was never adopted, so nobody ever bothered. Realistically, that what we're seeing, the adoption for AI isn't kind of Fargo it's definitely here to stay. So burying your head in the sand, ignoring it and continuing as is going to be the biggest mistake people make. Basically, it's early adoption will get the results and give you that understanding, if nothing else.
Okay, thank you. And Shane, I mean, is there anything that you think is any mistakes that brands will make?
Yeah, I mean it's a completely new area, so I think there'll be lots of mistakes. I agree with Matt. The biggest one, it will just be not getting started or starting too late. I think for those who do start it, I think there's a couple of mistakes that I anticipate. Is one, just kind of treating it as SEO with a different name, essentially, and expecting to get the results that they think they should. I think another mistake is not investing in it as a kind of credible channel. Because either there's a kind of lack of understanding or a lack of understanding of the opportunity, which goes back to that visibility audit we talked about as a sort of viable first step. I think those who start it are going to take their time to invest in it to the level they should. And again, I think they run the risk of losing out in terms of that early adopter advantage that you can get. And it really is a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think there's a few areas around investment that's going to be interesting to see as we move into 2026.
I think that's going to be the other mistake, is not investing in the data behind it and the monitoring and tracking, because ultimately it's like what's coming through your analytics is only going to be a small part. And my fear for a lot of people is if they rely purely on something like their analytics data, that's not going to give them the information to get buy-in in order to get the budgets or get like maximize returns, essentially. So if you're just if you look at a direct comparison traffic wise, people are going to go, well, it's 1/10 of my Google traffic or 100th of my Google traffic. So budget is going to be small as a result because we're not getting the traffic. And if you do that, then you're just going to get left behind. And so you need to invest in tracking things like share of voice and things. just so you can get that buy-in and kind of really get people to commit.
I think it's really valuable information, that, and hopefully the people watching this will take that away and sort of understand it and try and build a case around actually investing and getting that data and everything in place. So I think that's really valuable. So finally, just to finish off, like, if you had to bet one thing on GEO for 2026, what would it be? And I'll go with Shane because I went to Matt last time.
Yeah, I think the one bet for me would be that by the end of 2026, maybe even before that, but certainly by the end, I think GEO will be as fundamental to a marketing strategy as most of the other big channels like SEO and PPC. I think that would be the case for most brands in most industries. I think there'll be a large portion who didn't jump on it quickly enough and kind of don't have the fruits to show for that. But I think certainly towards the end of the year, it's going to be a key priority marketing channel for most brands, most if not all brands.
Yeah, it's a big one there. Big bet on that one. And to you, Matt.
My big bet when it comes to this is as soon as Google can figure out monetization and ads, then AI mode will become the default in the search results, and people as a result will continue to lose organic traffic, especially at the top of the funnel.
Excellent. So we got looking forward to that early in Q1 in 2026. There's lots of work going on around that. Perfect. Really appreciate your time today, Matt and Shane. Some incredibly insightful information that we've shared today. And that brings us to the end of today's session. Thanks again for joining us. If there's one thing to take away in this, GEO isn't the future trend. It's already reshaping how brands are being discovered right now today. Early movers will gain a clear advantage. Those who wait will find themselves optimizing for a model of search that's just quickly evolving. If you're starting to think about GEO or you're not quite there, ready to be, it's time to get ahead of the game. We're helping B2B teams explore what GEO means for their market, their visibility, and their content strategy. On our next session, we explore winning locally in 2026, where we'll look at how local discovery, proximity, and AI search are coming together in new and unexpected ways. If your brand operates across multiple locations or services, specific regions, this one's not to be missed. Thanks again, Matt and Shane. Appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next session. Bye-bye.
Thanks.